Hello, hello. Today is February 24th, 2026. This is SIG Node Weekly Meeting. Welcome, everybody. Last I checked, we had only one topic today. And Kevin, do you want to take over?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Great. Um, yeah, so the only topic that I had was just a general discussion around the email that I sent yesterday. Um, we've been talking for a while. I think even, you know, as early as last year sometime, we floated around the idea of um, eventually promoting the DRA driver that NVIDIA has been implementing for GPUs to something that is more centrally governed by the Kubernetes project. And basically the discussion topic today is, trying to look at that a bit more seriously. Is that something that the community would want? And if so, what steps we can take to actually make that happen? And so I think, purpose of this meeting is just to kind of talk through any concerns that people might have with that, uh, and or show support if it's something that you guys would like to see. Um, Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's just kind of general question and answer. Is this something that we want to do? Is this something we don't want to do, and why?
I support. I personally is very supportive on this one, and but I do know the community. Maybe Derek raised some logistic question. I believe that's logistic question. It's not the yeah. So maybe yeah. Anyone have like this have concern, please speak out. Otherwise, we can talk to how to address those logics question right raised by Derek.
Mhm. Francesco, you have your hand up.
Yeah, apologies if this was raised previously, but what about hardware availability and community onboarding? Those are the two first things that come to my mind. Community onboarding is okay. How do you plan to add, for example, new maintainers, I guess so, or contributors, and how to onboard them? I mean, if there is anything specific about this driver, but the most pressing question is what about GPU availability for testing purposes?
Yeah. So the first one, I think the answer is definitely yes. We want to get more people in the community involved with helping develop features and continuing to maintain it. Every project like this, these sub projects get they kind of have their own charter for how they want to do release management and maintenance of the project. But in general, I think we would plan to adopt something very similar to what the rest of the Kubernetes org has, with an owner's file. There'd be, approvers, there'd be reviewers, the standard kind of uh, thing that we do in all the other repos. Um, and obviously a lot of the initial feature planning for the driver would come from features that maintainers from NVIDIA know about. But I think the actual design process and people actually coming in and contributing to it would look very similar to what we do in Kubernetes itself, would be the idea. Um, Regarding the second question you had, what was it again? Sorry. Oh, the testing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's about
that's still, yeah, of
getting GPUs because they come with they don't come
course.
easily.
Yeah. So that's an open question, but it's something that DIMS is looking actively at here at NVIDIA. I don't know what the current status of it is, but I know there's been a lot of talk about um, how we're going to do this, because in order for this to be successful, in order for us to even be able to do this, we have to solve that problem, right? Because one of the criteria of being a donated project is that everything that you do runs on open infrastructure. And so that will have to be true for the any GPU testing that we or any tests that we run on for GPUs as well. So I don't have the answer, but I know we're actively looking at how to make that possible, because we can't actually complete the donation until we have that figured out.
Thank you.
And I wanted to add here maybe quickly that even internally at NVIDIA, this is sometimes maybe more challenging than it should be. And at least my point of view as a major contributor here to this project, it would actually help us having this conversation, right? Having even stronger arguments to making the required like testing CI infrastructure available. It's a good thing. It's a good conversation to have.
Yep. I think this will help drive that, to be honest, right? So, yep. I think Sergey, you're first.
Yeah, I have a question about external dependencies. I didn't check what the latest for D-Ray NVIDIA. Do you have some dependencies on something that is not open, like NV Sentinel, maybe some metrics collection, some internal libraries that are private and have a separate release cycle? Uh, anything like that we need to be
No.
aware of?
Nope, nothing like that. We were very careful in the development of this that we always, any package that we pulled in, we tried to pull from API machinery or other, standard Kubernetes orgs. And if we didn't have something available there, we made a few exceptions, but we made sure that they were things that were already vendored in by the Kubernetes project itself. And I don't think there's anything that doesn't fall into one of those two categories. Either that or we wrote it ourselves, and it's just part of the repo, rather than trying to, pull in some external dependency that's not something that's commonly used. Yeah.
Of course, we depend on NVML, but we're doing that through the Go bindings. So,
Yes.
and I mean, there's tons of precedents for that already, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
It's my turn. Okay. So, I think a lot of people have concern, and the major concern is just because this one is very vendor specific, right? Centric,
Yeah.
vendor specific and centric. But on the other hand, this is why I support Razor through that private email earlier sent. Because on the other hand, I did see in Kubernetes we do have the precedents. Right, CSI is really vendor specific, but the CSI, the SIG storage is not really maintain it. They only maintain CSI pieces. They don't maintain implementation. So then it is up to each vendor to figure out the test driving integration, all those kind of things. But the storage didn't respond much things. But we also have another precedent, right? So it is CRI, right? CRI, we basically SIG Node actually take a much big duty here, responsibility, at least in the initial couple 2 years, I think. So we ensure of all those kind of alignment, ensure of those migration, all those kind of things. Until today, we still have the two implementation, right, endorsed and signaled even like the help them to go to GA. So I just want to make sure what expectation we will have here. This is goes to the logistic and what it is the rule and the policy we build around this one. Because in the past we do have the governance built around those kind of things. Which one we want to apply, and we need to discuss those kind of things. And I think a lot of concern it is a signal that can signal take that responsibility similar as the at least this from me container runtime, or it is we keep similar as the CSI approach and just in charge about the API, and then we need to implement some of the simulator or something like that, keep that API compatible. That's all. Anyway, that's my concern. I don't have concern about this donation. I just concern about how the process. Yeah.
Yep. No, makes sense. Yeah, these are the things we need to figure out, and I think this is just the initial conversation. This wouldn't happen for a while. It's more just we want to make sure that there's actually support in the community and that it's something that we should actually start exploring more seriously. But I think even when we first created the DRA driver years ago, at least me and you, Don, we had this conversation in one of our NVIDIA Google syncs about what would the future plans for the DRA driver be, because lots of CSPs have a dependency on this component, and it just being governed by a single vendor makes it hard to ensure that that it has some sort of neutral usage across all of the different CSPs. And so this helps solve that problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was my major concern as well. Just to be clear, is that there would be some pushback because it is a vendor specific component. It by definition is, at least at the moment. And so if those concerns aren't actually shared, and like you said, there is precedence in multiple areas, then yeah, I think there's nothing really blocking us uh, from moving forward with this as soon as we get some of the logistics figured out. Yeah, it would be good to hear some support, positive or negative, on the mailing list so that there is some discussion there and it's not just this mail that went out and doesn't look like it was discussed beyond me just sending an email. So yeah, if people could, maybe +1 or say something on the email list so we have a record that's kind of more public, that would be great.
Sorry, there was no way for me to raise my hand because I think I'm not invited or something. But one question, I think, Kevin, you did touch upon it, but I think more broadly, I want to understand what is the goal of this donation. I don't know if this has been answered previously or discussed, but like what is it that we are trying to achieve? One thing you mentioned that it is going to be vendor neutral and other CSPs and more people can contribute to it.
Sure. I mean, so from the email that I sent yesterday, I can just read the 5 points that we had. The first one was providing a canonical example of a non-trivial DRA driver implementation. We do have the example DRA driver, which, actually, funnily enough, it was created backwards. So I did the first implementation of the DRA driver for GPUs, and then I used what I built there to create the example DRA driver. Now they kind of have a life of their own, but this would be the first one that's, not just the example driver, which would be, have a more central governance around it. The second one is to enable tighter collaboration between the team maintaining this component and upstream Kubernetes maintainers in terms of the DRA and API surface, right? All the people involved with DRA can now also become active maintainers of this project in addition to any of the upstream features being built. The third one is broadening the maintainer base and ensuring long-term sustainability. This is the whole non-vendor specific governance. Project can continue to live on, even if NVIDIA, for whatever reason, which I don't think would ever happen, decided not to continue maintaining it. It could continue to be maintained independent of that. It's also helping to ensure that Kubernetes scheduling and node management fully supports GPUs as first-class resources going forward. I think this is already the case, but having this project as an official Kubernetes project will help, make sure that any changes that do make their way into the scheduler or, kubla changes that may come along, this can be the first, DRA driver that you can push those features into to make sure that whatever is being built is actually usable and should be built in the way that it's been designed. And the last one is a fairly important one, but it can serve as the reference implementation for GPU acceleration in the Kubernetes AI conformance program. So we have this AI conformance program that was announced at KubeCon last year. And at least in the next version of the conformance program, having DRA available is mandatory, and this can serve as the reference implementation for how to do GPU acceleration in that program. And I think that's one of the main selling points for actually doing this now rather than later, as the program's still being developed. Does that answer your question, Swati?
Yeah. And this email that you are referencing to, was it sent out to SIG Node or NVIDIA internally? Because I didn't get that. But I don't know where did you share it.
Yeah, it was sent to SIG Node and
SIG Node, yeah.
and Kubernetes Dev. So anyone on the dev mailing list, it was CC'd for both of them.
Oh, thank
Mhm. Kevin, you're next.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'd like to know if we do accept this is going forward, like what would be the requirements for something like AMD or Intel to like, I feel like we would need some kind of policy in place of like how much, because I don't think SIG Node wants to maintain every DRA driver out there in existence. And I guess maybe we would need some kind of details on like what it's like what's the base we need to get it donated versus that's at least the main question I have. Probably more for SIG Node than NVIDIA, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kevin, you have the experience with the CSI, right? Storage. You used to work also with the storage SIG, and they have the example. I think in this one, maybe we need to follow how storage, SIG storage deal with. This is why earlier I said the two presidents. I don't want to repeat the container D and the qual, and let's figure out to follow what the storage SIG deal with CSI.
Not sure what Kevin that was for, but I have not had any experience with CSI.
I have not either. So.
I don't know, Bernal, if your hand was up for that question, but something that I think about, I mean, I think the expectation is if NVIDIA donated, then like any DRA driver vendor could also donate. And I think that this goes a little bit to Don's question more philosophically, like what is SIG Node's actual input in the process of helping like own a sub project like that? Like, SIG Node as this, as an entity probably wouldn't, I think like the vendors would probably be largely responsible for maintainership and everything like that, but having them in the, as a sub project would mean that their governance could be a little bit more decentralized, and people could be a contributor outside of the vendor companies. And I think if we accept any of them, then we would probably want to have a process to accept any of them.
Yeah, I think it opens the door for, like you said, anyone coming in and requesting it. And so that begs the question, what is the criteria for deciding yes or no? And why would you leave one vendor out when you've accepted others? Right.
Yeah.
That's
I think it almost feels
question.
like this is a category of SIG Node projects which are different from the general category. Maybe like almost, is it a driver category project where we expect it to work differently than our other projects, right? Like mainly be driven by one vendors. It could have maintenance from outside the vendor. Maybe there could be bars on how what the life cycle of the project is in terms of how often it releases alongside Kubernetes and how many stable versions it supports and so on. So I think I'm overall supportive, but I'm raising the same questions that Peter just raised, right? Like how does SIG Node take on so many drivers? Is it a special type of project which is different? Can we write that down somewhere and then say, okay, this is a general SIG Node project. This is a special one which is dealing with a vendor driver. So we expect it to operate slightly differently in practice.
This is basically what example I gave earlier. Two presidents, right? If we treat this as a special donation and the SIG Node take much more responsibility, then that's kind of like the container decryal. And if we say that no, we don't want, basically it's just find a home in a Kubernetes community, and because initially start from the SIG node, and then all those kind of responsibility, since it's a vendor, of course there's the governance, you need accepted maintainer outside the company vendor, all those kind of things. But we just play off like the SIG storage to the CSI, right? So we don't respond for all this kind of thing, but it's just high level. We just need to show, oh, here it is the version compatibility. Here it is the release time, align with those kind of things. That's all. that's the governance and the policy. Then that's the CSI model. Another one is just the CII model, because I do think about the CII. SIG Node took a huge amount of the responsibility, especially initially, right? So that's different model. This is why I threw earlier two example. Yeah.
Sorry, I think you could hand up.
As we were talking about CSI, I was thinking about how DRA drivers are quite similar to device plugins, and potentially the way we handle device plugins is the way we should be handling DRA drivers as well. So as per my understanding, one of the things that we do is in the Kubernetes official documentation, we essentially say that these are the device plugin examples that are backed by the community. So we have a list of them, and potentially a way of handling DRA drivers like this, assuming that they're going to be over time, loads of them getting populated, would be to do something similar for DRA drivers. So we say in the documentation that these are the device plugin, DRA drivers that are recognized by the community. And in terms of, their cadence and how they move forward, obviously community can participate, but then they still have that independence in terms of, how the maintainers want to move forward with the features and stuff. We can certainly have these kind of DRA drivers in terms of their development handled as part of SIG Node as well, but that does mean that there's going to be a proliferation of these DRA drivers over time. So that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think it's worth, something that I've been thinking about in this process and is worth noting, asking the question, what is SIG Node? We hear, obviously, this is like the SIG Node meeting, but, we can have ownership by SIG Node, people participating in SIG Node, even though none of the leadership in SIG Node, for instance, is participating in these sub-projects. There are projects today that are like that, like even the node readiness controller has people who participate in SIG Node working on it, but no formally codified leaders of SIG Node, just people who the SIG Node leaders trust to run the governance of the project and to develop it. And because it fits under the umbrella of what we consider to be the node, we own that. So I really think that there's plenty of precedent to own a project like that. I don't think SIG Node needs to get super involved. SIG Node, the leadership of SIG Node and people who maybe aren't directly tied to one of the vendors need to get super involved in the governance or in the life cycle of these projects. The point of putting them there is so that people that there is a place for people to go and participate in the open if they want to. And then the other thing, I had another thing that I was thinking of. I think you can also sort of consider the development that we've done on DRA as the early CRI days as well. So to Don's point about that big involvement that we had in the containerd and cryo as the process of the CRI was being developed. I think we've actually done a lot of that work in getting DRA to stable those APIs because, we have been working, obviously NVIDIA and Intel are two players that were really instrumental in pushing forward DRA, even though it was owned by SIG Node. It was driven, also by people who working in SIG Node on behalf of the vendors. So I think we are also at the point now where we don't even necessarily, as SIG Node, need to have that much input into the driver because we have the API. And we can see clearly when drivers are supporting the API and when they're not. And that does sort of call into question the conformance suite that device management, of working group device management is talked about a little bit. But ultimately, like, I hear the desire from NVIDIA to have a place in the open to donate this. It doesn't super make sense as its own CNCF project. There is precedent for a Kubernetes SIG to own this as a sub-project, even though it's largely driven by a vendor. I imagine that there are other DRA driver vendors that are interested in doing a similar thing. So I think I totally agree that we need to figure out some specifics, but I like this doesn't feel like an anti-pattern at all to me. This feels perfectly within the bounds of what has been done and what should be done.
My turn. So my second question, it is also it's not from me, but I just summarize people's question and concern. And the second question, it is people to say why is SIG Node? Because DRI here actually is beyond single node, right? So most of that we are working on, and why it is cannot just have another like the driver, SIG driver or SIG driver or something like I have my personal opinion, but I do try to summarize people's concern raised to me and question me, and I just want this to community and hear how people, how everyone feel.
I mean, I can throw my 2 cents in there, at least from my perspective, I guess being heavily involved from DRA from the beginning and also being, historically heavily involved in SIG Node, even though I haven't been around as much recently. I think to me, it just felt like the natural fit because it is about resources that eventually make their way and get advertised and consumed in a very similar way to the device plugin, which is clearly a SIG Node style project and API. And so it felt like the natural fit. Funnily enough, most of the DRA stuff happening upstream nowadays is not on the node side anymore. Most of it is on the scheduling side. So, I think your question's valid, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Like, why SIG Node? Why not SIG scheduling or even SIG architecture or something like that? But I think at the end of the day, for me, it feels like a natural fit because it is kind of a device plugin 2.0 style API from the perspective of an end user requesting and wanting resources available to their pod that then runs eventually on some node somewhere.
That's true my answer here because people asking me. Yes, through my question, I feel similar as the Kevin here. I said the DRA initially actually start from single node, not multiple node, and a single node for fractional GPU support, and also besides of this GPU DRA driver, we also have the CPU DRA driver. That's the single node. Are we to split that into the multiple place? And to donate like the multiple node DRA driver to the SIG scheduling, and then or SIG architecture, but the CPU DRA driver, or even maybe in the future we expanded that even more to the SIG node. And the similar things, there are another thing it is, I said, all the feature, not all the feature, majority of the node feature also need to make that work with the orchestration, need to work with the scheduler to some extent. And are we going to donate all those node features and node direct go to the SIG scheduler? You need to just have the cut line and have some boundary. Anyway, this is the answer I give to people when the people ask me this. So I share here. Yeah. Swati.
Yeah, I finally figured out how to raise my hand. Okay, so the question is how post nation, how the prioritized roadmap figured out. Like if you, for example, if multiple vendors have a conflicting, conflicting or something that one specific organization wants to have, because we want it to be vendor neutral, like want to have this particular feature, and then another organization want to have another feature. How do those prioritized for a particular release? Is it just based on the number of people available to work on that, or how those decisions or the discussions in the SIG meetings? Like, how do you justify that this is supposed to be prioritized for a particular release?
think there's multiple levels of ownership, right? Like, are you talking about like on the DRA API side, how does SIG Node as an entity choose which feature to prioritize? Or are you asking as a sub-project, how would the NVIDIA DRA driver in an open world allow for multiple vendors to have a stake in what implementation details happen? Like, which are you
I
asking?
think the latter. I think the latter more, but both. Because from the NVIDIA side, it's possible that we may have some features that we want to develop for a particular release for a particular type of hardware. So I think both. I'm asking about both. So how this resolves to a single point of prioritized map where if there is a specific NVIDIA need, that can also be part of the roadmap, and also if not just NVIDIA specific.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really good question, sort of something that people in the, when we were talking just with the leads in NVIDIA, we were talking about a little bit like how would someone get involved, especially when the roadmap is so contingent on NVIDIA hardware that is, it's going to be hard for that to ever be really fully community driven, obviously like all of the software pieces on top definitely can be, but at the end of the day, there are logistical, they're just constraints. At a certain point, it's a private company making decisions on its, for its customers. But I'll also say, like, isn't there a lot of precedent for this kind of decision-making process just in the open source? Like, that's just what open source has been doing. Like Kubernetes is the exact same example where like there are situations in SIG Node where there's a limited number of approvers for certain things, and we need to choose what to work on in a certain KEP cycle. And, the approvers make a decision partially based on their position in the SIG, but also partially based on their position in their respective company, and trying to balance those two is like a constant tension, but there's plenty of example with that. So I guess like the key would be to make sure that there's a contributor ladder available for people who want to build up in the NVIDIA GPU driver or DRA driver code base, so that if there are other entities who want to have a stake in the development of that, they could. And, making sure that the decision making is as open as possible so that there's space for people to be contribute their ideas. And just the same, like, and that would also apply for NVIDIA. So like NVIDIA would have, like, presumably would have a decent amount of decision making power in it, just based on the number of people that they would have developing in it. And so decisions that they would want to be making would be basically based on the amount of upstream influence that they have on the project. And yeah, does that sort of answer your question?
I think maybe she expected Kevin or someone from NVIDIA to answer.
Sure. Maybe. Well, sorry for stepping in a little bit prematurely.
No, I think it does answer the question. And like you said, based on the people who are available to contribute for a particular feature, that's how it goes. Who is available to do a particular thing, and then the reviews and PRs and all. So yeah,
I mean, I think this
I think
is true for any
yeah.
open source project too. Like a lot of the features in Kubernetes were born out of the need for maybe not one specific vendor, but a feature that people needed. And so some company that really needs it throws some employees behind it, that gets implemented, and then it makes its way into the code base, potentially over other features, because that's where the manpower happens to come from. I guess this is slightly different because the component being built is specifically for, in this case, improving the feature set that would allow people to make use of NVIDIA GPUs. But I think at the end of the day, it's not that much different. I think, Peter, this is maybe what you were getting at as well.
Yeah. I think another example is like the cloud providers, a CAPI provider or something like that is the same sort of thing, where ultimately that's a gateway for people to come in and get access to vendor proprietary hardware. But there's all these entities that are agreeing upon what that gateway looks like. And ultimately the decisions on like, what is exposed underneath comes down to who's in the community, who's working on it. And that's the same for any project, as you mentioned.
Sorry, Swati, I think I cut you off. Did you have something more you wanted to say?
I was just saying, I think the reason I was asking this is the balance that uh, like post donation, it's not to be like only NVIDIA specific development is happening in this space, and then whatever the goal was to and then like we are going away from that goal and we are just doing NVIDIA specific or people only from NVIDIA because they have a prioritized list of items that they want to develop on versus like contribution from different sources.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it'll be very important to get people from outside NVIDIA quickly ramped up and becoming project maintainers so that they can help shepherd some of those changes in that aren't necessarily only in NVIDIA's interest.
So is there any plan to have some orientation workshops for community people? I think that this was asked in the beginning, but is like, or that can be part of the plan too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any direct plans at the moment, but we can certainly do that. Yeah. Are there any other questions or concerns or comments? Hey, Mike.
Hey, so I've been looking at the code. It's interesting. I like the opportunity. I think it'll be good for us to be able to take a look and some people will be able to do similar implementations, but the fact that it shows the kubelet plugins as well are there. It really seems to be you've isolated the portions of the NVIDIA stack that are really hosted inside of that node, right? For in interacting with kubelet for the DRA stuff as well. That seems useful.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Great. Thanks. Kevin.
Yeah, I just think for like to answer, go back to Francesco's earlier point around the GPU access, it's probably a good, like maybe if we could have a clear requirements of like which kind of hardware we would need from NVIDIA and then maybe engage with SIG, KETS, Infra to see about, quota and everything. Cause like our GPU testing, I think all we're doing is testing a T4 for the device plugin. And that's the only, I don't know if we have reserved instances on GCP for that one, but I know that there isn't any blockers on getting the access, but we just want to make sure that the quota is there. And
yeah,
I know it also gets a lot harder getting access to, like, we haven't really considered stuff like A100s or H100s in the Kubernetes CI at all yet. So it probably would be worth it.
Yeah, definitely would be worth it because, a large part of the DRA driver was built to support GB200 and multi-node NVLink. And so our internal CI runs on, among other GPUs, it runs on a full GB200 system. And so we would most likely want to mimic that, but on open infra in order to continuously be able to test this multi-node NVLink support. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I think DIMS is the one owning this and trying to figure out the right way to make this happen, even if it means, which it most likely will mean, NVIDIA footing the bill for some of this infrastructure. But I just don't know the details. I know he's had a Google Doc open for this for a number of months, and it's slowly making progress. But I don't know what the status of it is. We'll have to sync with him when he's offline because I don't think he's on this meeting. No.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I guess maybe that's helpful to know for the donation, like what hardware and what, because like I don't know if the CI is public on the NVIDIA repo. Like
it is, you can see it, but you can't, like it runs on internal hardware. So we have a way to poke through and get it to run there. But
Okay.
it's not something we could do once we donate. We couldn't run on this hardware because that would be against the policy guidelines for it being a donated project. So we'd have to run on a GKE instance running with GB200, for example, or something like that. So we need to look into how to make that happen. And like I said, the donation can't go through until we figure that out. And so I think between now and when we do finally make the donation, there's a set of things that we need to close on, that being one of them. So, this is the first conversation, making sure we have buy-in, and there will be many more conversations before this actually happens. So,
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think everyone has hard time getting access to these machines, even as developers. So I know
yeah,
that it probably is a good thing to do. But yeah, I think that would be, well, it sounds like that is your next step anyway, if we do this. So
it's
that sounds
definitely
good.
one of the steps. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And one more thing I want to raise here, which chatted, like there's still intention for this to be released and integrated as part of the NVIDIA GPU operator, right?
Yes. So it will always be a standalone project. Um, um, for no other reason than we have lots of customers that don't run with the GPU operator, but do want to run with the DRA driver, just like we always had customers that wanted the device plugin, but not the GPU operator. So we always had that as a standalone product. But yes, the ultimate goal, and I saw Chris on the call and maybe a couple other people that can speak more to this. But yeah, the ultimate plan is always um, to make it an official operator of the GPU operator eventually. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Christy.
Yeah, that's
Or
still the current plan. And I don't think the donation of the project changes that either. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, there is precedent for it. Like we, at least historically, have had NFD, for example, as an operand of the GPU operator, even though it's I think it's a Kubernetes 6 project, similar to what this is going to be. I don't know if it's still an official operator, Chris. You can correct me there, but I know it used to be at some point. So,
Yeah, it's a dependency. Yeah, NFD is a dependency of ours, and we also users can deploy as a subchart of our Helm chart, so they can get both in one install.
right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the operator is just, managing a bunch of operands, and so whether those are internally maintained or externally, especially if we know that this is something we always want to be able to integrate with, that can be part of the charter of keeping the DRA driver in a state that it can continuously be consumed by the GPU operator. So, okay. Any other last comments? Sergey, did any last minute new agenda items get added while this has been happening, or is this still the only one?
No, that's still the only one, and I think it was pretty interesting discussion. Thank you for bringing it in, and looking forward to see specific details.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.